And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata. And yes, I know it's been a while, but the 2023 Major League Rugby season is almost upon us, is just a couple of weeks away. And so, because of that, I'm going to start now putting out more content, especially focusing on Major League Rugby. And what better way to kick it off by doing a preview of the conferences, starting with the Eastern Conference and then moving over to the Western Conference. Of course, with the Western Conference, we will be talking about the new kids on the block, the Chicago Hounds, and we'll be going into for these videos, we'll be not going into super detail, but kind of highlighting some of the new players, some of the movements that are going to trades, the players that are leaving the league, players that are coming into the league. Lots of great stuff. It's going to be very interesting. Then, of course, I will do what I did last time because it became very popular last time. I'm going to make my all too early final season ranking predictions for the 2023 season. Let's see if I get a little bit closer than I did last time with last year's predictions. I wasn't too off, to be honest. So we'll see how close I am with predicting it. But rugby is, like any sport, it's very hard to predict the outcomes. Now, some of these rosters are not finalized. Some players are still making movements, as evident when we go to the Rugby New York Ironworkers. They just made an announcement of a new acquisition just today. I'm filming this on a Saturday, the 28th, I believe, and January 28th. So things are still kind of progressing along. Any major updates, I'll try to update them in the video or address them at a later time. So anyways, let's start with the Eastern Conference, and we're going to go from bottom to how they end in the season, from the bottom to the top, and we're going to start with Old Glory DC. So Old Glory DC finished the season 3-13 with 23 points, as you see right there. And so, Old Glory DC, I felt, was that team that had a lot of potential to be a very strong team. Just unfortunately, especially with how tough the Eastern Conference was last season, when you had the upper echelon teams like Rugby New York Ironworkers, New England Freejacks, and Rugby ATL, they just didn't have the muscle to deal with them. This year will be interesting as we talk about the three teams that I just mentioned before and the changes they're going through. I feel this season might be a good season for Old Glory DC. First of all, they do have a new head coach in Josh Sims, a New Zealander, former head coach of the NPC's Hawke's Bay Magpies. The NPC is the New Zealand's pro rugby league. Josh Sims has come in with a lot of fanfare and pretty good credentials. The team itself is pretty much the same team from last season. You're bringing back Jameson Fauna Schultz, you're bringing back Corey Daniel, you're bringing back Danny Tusitala, Threaten Palamo, Mike Dubales, Penny Lasqua, Junior Sal. The big acquisition to Old Glory DC, which has got a lot of people buzzing about, is the addition of former All Black Sevens veteran Kurt Baker, who has more than 50 tournaments under his belt with the All Black Sevens, as well as was part of that All Black Sevens team that's won 2 of the 3 All Black Sevens World Cup championships. So Kurt Baker, very similar to Tom Mitchell when he was with the LA Guillotines. Tom Mitchell, the former captain of the England Sevens team. Kurt Baker, a savvy veteran, great leadership, tough player, very fast. If you've never seen him play before, you'll be impressed at how fast this guy moves. He could be that spark and that veteran leadership that Old Glory DC kind of needs to make it to that top echelon of Eastern Conference teams. And again, as I mentioned before, because of what's going to be happening with those top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, I feel this is going to be the year that Old Glory DC really turns some heads and possibly makes their way into the playoffs. Next, we're going to go with NOLA Gold. And right there, you see they finished 4-12 last season, 25 points, fifth place in the Eastern Conference. They are bringing back Kane Thompson as their head coach, but they're going through quite a few changes themselves. There is no Carl Myers, who was the top point scorer for the team last year, as well as no Nick Feeks, who was one of their top try scorers last year, scored 5 tries in the Major League Rugby season. Nick Feeks has been traded to Rugby New York. There's also been the announcement of winger Juan Capello, who has retired. JP Eloff, who is still the top point scorer for the NOLA Gold franchise, he has been traded to the newly created Chicago Hounds team. Also, So those are the players that they have lost. They do get Dougie Fife from New England in a trade that they did with the Freejacks, which is a huge acquisition for NOLA Gold, as well as Jordan Trainer, who is a young fullback. He impressed me a lot when he was playing for the LA Guiltinis. For a person who just made his debut last year for the LA Guiltinis, he did really, really well, especially when the back half of the team was going through so many injuries. Jordan Trainer really stepped up. So I feel that Jordan Trainer is a great acquisition for NOLA Gold. For the rest of the team, you're bringing back a lot of the core of the team. Waldron, Pat O'Toole, Cam Dolan, the top the most capped Eagle currently on the Eagles national team, as well as one-time leader of the Eagles. Moni Tanguea is also there, Devin Short, Andrew Guerrera. You're bringing back Luke Campbell and Damian Stevens, two of the best halfbacks in the league. Harley Wheeler, who has scored the most tries for NOLA Gold with 6 tries last year, and JP Duplessis in your center position. So, NOLA Gold, bringing back a good majority of the team. It does hurt to lose a guy with the leadership of Carl Myers. It does hurt to lose a guy like Nick Feeks. Bringing in Dougie Fife, I think, will be a good replacement. But the thing is, the way I look at it, you had all this talent on NOLA Gold, but they were only 4-12 last season. Nothing of the team now screams of making that next advancement, kind of like a Kurt Baker with Old Glory DC. So sadly, I feel as strong as full as a team it is coming back from last season, they were only 4-12 last year. I don't feel they're going to do much better, though. Again, foreshadowing, the way that the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference from last season, the way their teams are going to be transitioning, NOLA Gold might be able to work their way up in the Eastern Conference. I feel, though, that they might get pretty worked over when they do interconference play with the Western Conference teams, but we'll see. Next up is your Toronto Arrows, your representatives from Canada. Last season finished 8-8 with 41 points, while dealing with the longest road trip of any professional sports team in, I believe, professional sports history. The Toronto Arrows bring back head coach Peter Smith, who has spent pretty much the entire time with the franchise, 5 seasons, and now is going to be having his second season as head coach. Not a lot of changes for Toronto. They do lose Andrew Cortrain, but they are bringing back Mitch Richardson, James O'Neill. They're bringing back Corey Thomas. They're bringing back Lucas Rumble, who is a dominant force for the Toronto Arrows. Sam Malcolm, top point scorer, 99 points for the Toronto Arrows last season. He finished 5th overall in Major League Rugby. And they're bringing back Jack McRogers, 6 most tries for the Toronto Arrows, most tries for the franchise. They are losing Mitch Richardson, James O'Neill, Cole Keith, and Ronan Neely, but they do bring in Travis Larson from Seattle and Corey Thomas, formerly of the LA Guiltinis, which is a good acquisition as well. Again, looking at the team, there are a lot of losses for the Toronto Arrows, and again, they did struggle quite a bit, but it does happen when you're barely ever playing at home. Now that things have kind of settled down a little bit with COVID and traveling, Toronto Arrows will have a more manageable season. But again, I don't see much change for the Toronto Arrows, so they might still be struggling again, like they did last season. Now we're going to get to the what I feel are the top tier teams of the Eastern Conference, but there's going to be quite a bit of changes with these teams. Let's start with your reigning, defending MLR champions, the Rugby New York Ironworkers. The name change has happened now. They are going to be no longer Rugby New York. They are the Rugby New York Ironworkers. They finished the season 11-5 with 56 points, came in third in the Eastern Conference, but they were the hottest team going into the playoffs, and they managed to go through Rugby ATL, go through the New England Freejacks, and then defeated the two-time MLR champions, the Seattle Seawolves, in the championship final to pick up the MLR Shield. They are going through quite a few changes, though, as I mentioned before. First of all, starting with a new head coach, James Semple, formerly of the Utah Warriors. He was a player coach for them. He is a former New Zealand player, as well as coach over in New Zealand. He was nominated in the New Zealand Pro League for Coach of the Year in 2020 and 2021. So a lot of fanfare for James Semple coming in. He will take over for the defending champions, Rugby New York Ironworkers. The Ironworkers did announce that Andy Ellis, unfortunately, the veteran All Blacks player, is retiring from Major League Rugby. He will now be a technical advisor for the Ironworkers. So that is a huge loss for them when it comes to veteran leadership on and off the field. But again, being a technical advisor, he is not very far from his former teammates in the Ironworkers. Other than that, they are bringing back a good majority of the team. Some very, very important pieces. Of course, Ed Fideau, the top Major League Rugby try scorer of last year with 12 tries. Ultimately, the hottest player, just like with Rugby New York being the hottest team going into the playoffs, Ed Fideau was really a big, big reason why Rugby New York Ironworkers were able to pick up the Shield last season. They're bringing back Cara Pryor. They're bringing back Jack Heighton, fullback for the Rugby New York Ironworkers, who was essential for the team, especially when Andy Ellis was dealing with a bunch of injuries. He was a top point scorer last year for the Ironworkers. The most dynamic Ironworker of them all. The Butcher, Dylan Fawcett, is coming back. 6 tries scored last season. Sam Windsor, still the most points scored in Major League Rugby history, is coming back at fullback, at fly half, I'm sorry. And then, of course, the return of the very colorful Pago Haini coming back from injury. The guy is one of the nicest and most entertaining guys on and off the pitch. He was doing some sideline work when he was dealing with injuries for Rugby New York games. He also does a lot of their social media for the Ironworkers. I highly recommend that you check him out. He is always fun and entertaining to watch. So we have all those pieces coming back. Nick Feeks is going to NOLA Gold, as I mentioned before. So that's a little bit of a blow to them. But then they just announced that Christian Rodriguez, a utility back from the LA Guillotines, has joined the squad. He is going to be huge because he has always been very pivotal for the LA Guillotines as a finisher during the latter half of games. It should also be mentioned, I mentioned it before in a report, but the Rugby New York Ironworkers are now playing at the Red Bull Arena, which is located in Harrison, New Jersey. Capacity about 2,000 fans. It is the home for the New York Red Bulls Major League Soccer team, as well as the New Jersey New York Gotham Football Club for the National Women's Soccer League as well. You know, again, with pretty much the majority of the team coming back for New York, even with a head coaching change, I feel New York has a good chance of repeating a return visit to the Major League Rugby Championship game. I don't know if they'll pick up the Shield once again. It just depends about momentum. Rugby is all about momentum. They were not looking like the strongest team going into the latter half of the season, but man, near the end, during the playoffs, they were red hot, and they made a run, and impressive run it was, which led to them winning the Shield. So who knows if they can repeat that. They do have the pieces to do that. So look out for the Ironworkers. They could become your second two-time Major League Rugby champions. Moving on, we have now Rugby ATL. And when you want to talk about changes, nothing more controversial than the change of their logo. If you know, you know. I'm not going to go into big details about it. Check out social media. Just type in Rugby ATL. there has been a firestorm of comments from very angry Rugby ATL fans about the change. But let's talk about what's going on the pitch. Last season, 11-5, 57 points, finished second. Unfortunately, lost in the playoff game to the eventual MLR champions, the Rugby New York Ironworkers. They're bringing back head coach Stephen Brett. Rugby ATL, not only have they changed the colors, they are going through a lot of changes on the team. They've lost Connor Cook, who has retired, Connor Keys, who has been traded to the New England Freejacks, Evan Minturn is gone, Justin Basson is gone, Marco Yancey van Rensburg, their top try scorer with 8 tries last year, is gone. Ryan Neal is gone. Their top point scorer, Joaquin de la Vega Medina, gone. Who's left? Well, pretty much everybody else is left, though. Ross Deacon comes back, Jason Dam, Damian Torres, Roland Gals, Will Leonard, and of course, more importantly, Kirk Coleman, 61 points scored last season, second most points scored for the team. But man, you look at the losses of Marco Yancey van Rensburg and Joaquin de la Vega Medina, two huge pivotal points of the Rugby ATL offense. I just don't see Rugby ATL doing much this season because of that. I feel they're going to get bulldozed over by Rugby New York. When we go into the Western Conference preview, I feel the Western Conference is going to be much stronger this year than the Eastern Conference. So I feel Rugby ATL will be struggling. They've usually been playoff contenders. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't this season. And now we go to New England Freejacks, who finished last season at an impressive 13-3, most wins in a Major League Rugby season, 62 points, finished first in the Eastern Conference, unfortunately lost in the Eastern Conference Championship to eventual Major League Rugby Shield winners, the Rugby New York Ironworkers. They are led once again by head coach Scott Matthey, who was voted Coach of the Year by Major League Rugby. But the big changes, and again, just like Rugby ATL, New England Freejack is going through some huge changes. The loss of Bodine Waka, who is moving over to Japan to join the Koblenko Steelers. He was the second highest point scorer in Major League Rugby last year, as well as your player of the year. And they also lost Slade McDowell, who was a top try scorer for New England with 8 tries last year. Both of them gone. They've also lost Dougie Fife, who was traded to NOLA Gold, and Sean Jacobian, who is going off to the new Chicago Hounds franchise. They do receive Ben Lesage, from formerly of Toronto Arrows and the LA Guillotines. I feel Ben Lesage is a dynamic young player. He has a lot of great years ahead of him. He could become a huge franchise player for New England. And then Connor Keys from Atlanta to maybe make up for some of that lost firepower. Of course, they have John Poland back, Paula Balancana, who's back, who scored 6 tries last season, and Mitch Wilson, who scored 7. So, even though they still have Paula Balancana and Mitch Wilson, 2 very huge parts of the New England Freejacks offense, man, the loss of Bodine Waka, the dude was phenomenal. There's a reason why he was voted Player of the Year by Major League Rugby. And then Slade McDowell as well. I just don't think you can make up that firepower with the pieces that they have now. They're really going to ask a lot of Paula Balancana and Mitch Wilson. They have to deal with Rugby New York. They have to deal with the Western Conference. It's good that Rugby ATL is kind of on the downs as well. But again, I feel that this does give the chance for Old Glory DC to make a run for it. Again, New England has become playoff contenders. Just like Rugby ATL, I just don't see it. I could really see it coming down in the Eastern Conference between Rugby New York Ironworkers and Old Glory DC. Maybe, again, a chance for NOLA or Toronto Arrows to jump into it. The Eastern Conference is going to be very interesting to watch because of all the puzzle pieces that have been changed. But that's what makes this exciting, right? So, once again, that is your Eastern Conference preview. Don't forget, the Major League Rugby 2023 season kicks off Friday, February 17th. With 2 games, you have the Toronto Arrows visiting Rugby ATL at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and New England Freejacks visiting NOLA Gold at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Both of them you can watch on your local television networks, or of course on the Rugby Network. We will go into details more about the schedule and game previews as we get closer to the season. But that's our Eastern Conference preview. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below who you feel is going to stand out in the Eastern Conference. If you're a fan of any of those franchises, let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the pitch.